It had always been my goal to live in a big metropolis like Paris. I eventually made it happen at the age of 27, moving into a quaint flat in the 11th arrondissement with my roommate and close university buddy Camille. The epitome of the Parisian, Camille was effortlessly chic, vibrant, and constantly surrounded by friends. Living together felt like an extended sleepover, full of late-night conversations, laughter, and an unlimited supply of experiences because of our wonderful relationship. Julien and Camille had been dating for almost 6 months. Tall, attractive, and endowed with an irresistible charisma, he was the type of guy that attracted attention with ease. He was a freelance photographer, and people liked him right away because of his laid-back demeanor. There had been a few occasions when I had met him, generally at social events or when he visited Camille. He seemed to be the ideal fit for her because he was always courteous, pleasant, and respectful. Julien was in Paris one weekend when Camille had to go for a family gathering in Lyon. While she was away, she requested me to watch her cat and make sure everything was all right. I didn't give it much thought because it was a straightforward favor. I thought Julien may stop by to feed the cat or get a few things because he had a key to the flat. I was working on a design project in my room on Saturday afternoon when I heard the front door open and close. Julien knocked on my door after a moment, and I assumed it was him. When I opened the door, he greeted me with his typical laid-back smile and said, "Hey, Leah. I hope I'm not disturbing you. Simply stopped over to pick up some of my belongings." "Don't worry, Julien," I replied, grinning back at him. "Enter now. Do you need assistance?" He looked around and said, "No, I'm fine. In fact, I had hoped you would be present. I thought we may have a glass of the wine I brought." I paused for a second. Drinking wine by myself with my roommate's boyfriend seemed a little strange. However, I didn't want to come out as impolite because Julien had always been open and pleasant. "Yes, why not?" Setting aside my work, I nodded. "A glass won't harm you." With the late afternoon light bathing the Paris roofs in a warm glow, we took our seats on the tiny balcony that looked out over the busy street below. We clinked glasses with a light-hearted cheers after Julien poured us each a glass of wine. "How is work going, then?" Taking a sip of his wine, Julien asked. "Are you still creating those awesome websites?" I said, unwinding a little, "Yeah, it's keeping me busy. But it's enjoyable. I enjoy the freedom and the opportunity to be creative." He looked at me for a little longer than usual before saying, "That's awesome. Your talent has always been there. I recall Camille showcasing some of your designs to me. They are quite amazing." I murmured, "Thanks," as a little flush rose up my cheeks. It feels good to finally pursue a passion of mine. With a thoughtful gaze, Julien nodded. "I get that. For me, photography is like that. You know, it's a means of seeing the world, not just a job." As we talked about our jobs, our favorite places in Paris, and anecdotes about Camille, the conversation flowed naturally. It felt cozy, like reuniting with an old friend. But as the light went down and the shadows lengthened, I became aware of a change in Julien's attitude. His eyes seemed to hold mine for a little too long, his laughing a bit too warm, and his praises grew more intimate. He abruptly and sincerely said, "You're really something, Leah. I understand why Camille enjoys your company. You have such wonderful energy." I tried to keep things light by laughing. "Thanks, but it seems like you're going overboard." The one with all the enthusiasm is Camille, who truly is the star. With a serious attitude, Julien shook his head. "No, I do mean it. There is a spark in you. It's revitalizing." I was worried all of a sudden because the air between us felt electric. Julien's intense gaze made me feel self-conscious, even though I knew he was simply being kind. In an attempt to find a way to defuse the situation, I looked down at my glass. I started to say, "Julien, but he interrupted, bending closer. His voice was low as he said, "Leah, can I be honest with you? You have always struck me as incredible. Even prior to Camille and I dating. You just have a certain quality." Stunned, I gazed at him. I had not anticipated this. Since Julian was Camille's boyfriend, I had always considered him to be totally off limits. But my pulse was pounding because of the way he was staring at me just now, his eyes brimming with something that was too near to desire. "We can't, Julian," I stated firmly as I retreated. "My companion is Camille. Her boyfriend is you." "This is incorrect." With a conflicted expression, he answered, "I know. Additionally, I don't want to cause any trouble. But I can't deny my feelings. I apologize if this causes you any discomfort." In an attempt to regain my composure, I inhaled deeply. "You have to work things out with Camille, Julian. This is not possible." He ran a hand through his hair and nodded. "You're correct. I apologize, Leah. I ought not to have spoken." I got up, put down my drink, and smiled tightly at him. "Julian, I think it's better that you leave. We must establish limits." He stood up, too, his face contrite. "I get it. I apologize profusely, Leah. I don't want our relationship to be strange." Despite my trembling voice, I responded, "It's okay. We should just forget this incident." Julian departed soon after, and I drew a trembling breath as the door shut behind him. My head was reeling from what had just happened. Even though I felt that stopping him was the correct thing to do, the anxiety from the interaction made it difficult to concentrate on anything else. I tried to put the unpleasantness of our previous talk behind me and stayed away from Julian's calls and texts throughout the course of the following few days. I didn't want to run the risk of offending Camille or jeopardizing our friendship. But despite my best efforts to forget, I couldn't get rid of the persistent sense that something was still open. I was reading a book one evening when I heard someone knock on my door. I was shocked to see Julian standing there, looking just as conflicted as ever, because I hadn't expected anyone. "What are you doing here, Julian?" To avoid attracting the neighbor's notice, I inquired in a low voice. "I apologize, Leah," he stated in a sincere tone. "I simply had to see you. I don't want to leave things like way, and I feel awful about the other day." I paused, caught between wanting to clear the air and needing to preserve limits. "I don't think this is a good idea, Julian." "I understand," he answered hastily. "But I only want to speak, I swear. No expectations, no pressure. All I have to do is explain myself." With a groan, I moved aside to make room for him. "All right. However, this must be the final instance." With a nod, he entered the living room and sat down on the couch. "I apologize sincerely, Leah. I never intended to put you in that situation, but I let my feelings control me." I crossed my arms and took a seat across from him. "You can't do that, Julian. When it's convenient, you can't just decide to blur the lines. Camille isn't worthy of it." He answered, "I know," with a sincere expression of regret. "Additionally, I've been attempting to work things out with her. I can't lie, though, I've been experiencing these feelings for some time and wasn't sure how to handle them." I firmly stated, "You deal with it by being honest with Camille. Avoid entangling me in your mess." His eyes fell to the ground as he nodded. "You're correct. I must speak with her. Additionally, I didn't want to lose your friendship." I lowered my voice and whispered, "You won't. However, we must maintain clarity. For the benefit of everybody." With a groan, Julian combed through his hair. "I'll speak with her. I swear. All I can hope is that we can all get past this." I answered, "We will," but I wasn't positive. "But it's your responsibility to mend Camille's relationship." I was both relieved and nervous when Julian left. I hoped he would make the right decisions for the sake of his relationship with Camille, even though I knew he had a lot to figure out. I was also aware that in order to preserve my friendship with her and keep the lines clear, I needed to uphold my own boundaries. After Camille's trip, everything felt nearly normal once more. We resumed our regular activities, exchanging tales about our week and organizing our next night out. But whenever she brought up Julian in conversation, there was an unsaid tension, and every time she did, I couldn't help but feel guilty. Camille abruptly turned to face me one evening as we were preparing dinner together, her face grave. "Hey Leah, may I ask you a question?" Obviously, I replied, putting down my knife and focusing entirely on her. "What's going on?" "It's about Julian," she said tentatively. "Have you recently noticed anything wrong with him?" My heart began to race, but I maintained a neutral attitude. "How far off?" She frowned and responded, "I don't know. I don't understand why he has been aloof. This is not how he typically is." I debated how much to say and bit my lip. I didn't want to lie to Camille, but I also didn't want to violate Julian's confidence. I answered cautiously, "I think he's just going through some stuff. Perhaps he requires some room to work things out." Camille gave a contemplative nod. "Yes, perhaps. I only hope he's doing well. He is really important to me." I smiled reassuringly at her while I was struggling with my own feelings on the inside. Although I realized that I had no control over Julian's decisions, I still wished to shield Camille from harm. I stayed away from Julian as the days passed, concentrating on my own life and giving him time to work out his relationship with Camille. It wasn't always easy, and occasionally I questioned whether I ought to have taken more action to step in. In the end, though, I realized that the best course of action was to honor the limits I had established and provide Camille with any assistance she required. After a few weeks, Camille informed me that she and Julian had made the decision to take a vacation. In addition to being sad, she hoped that some time apart would help them both come to their senses. I tried my best to be there for her at the trying time by listening to her and providing her with consolation and support. Additionally, I was reminded of the value of honesty, loyalty, and respecting the boundaries we set in our relationships as I saw Camille work through the highs and lows of her relationship. Although it wasn't always simple, I understood that upholding such limits was essential to keeping the relationships that were most important. Ultimately, I came to the realization that there are boundaries that should not be violated and that genuine friendship is about supporting one another through difficult times. I clung to that lesson as I went along, making it a point to always respect the boundaries that separated me from the individuals I cared about.